Well, hello everyone. This is Data Driven Formula One with Patrick Hans and Gana Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Ghana. Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode and also another episode about a small team, quite beloved, especially in Germany. We will speak about Zakspeed.
Yes, so Zakspeed today. And again, just to remind everyone that this is meant to be a podcast, but if you want to also see some cool images that we are able to share legally or based on Creative Commons license, you are welcome to join us on YouTube or Spotify.
Yep. So first, we start off with a short profile about its founder, which is Erich Zakowski. He was a master mechanic and then founded the Zakspeed racing team. Interesting is also his background, as he was an immigrant coming from East Prussia and immigrating after the war to West Germany. He has been born November 25 in 1934, means that he is 89 years today, meaning he's still alive and German by nationality.
Yeah, and he was like Patrick said, he had a very sort of from a very early age he realized his passion for cars and was a very brilliant mechanic. So he never studied in engineering, but as a mechanic he really excelled and even passed several exams in this. And these exams are quite tough in Germany. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So practically a little bit similar to Enzo Ferrari. And if we see people like Ferrari or Zakowski, they never formally studied engineering. But here you also have to consider that it have been other times. So especially if you're coming, let's say, from working class, it was not that easy in the beginning of the 20th century or even 1950s to go to university.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I don't know whether that's still the case. I think it is still the case that in engineering exam in Germany is also very tough. And what I know is that if you fail it 3 times, you cannot take it again, and so you will never become an engineer, and need to consider a change of the career, which is also quite risky.
Yeah, but this is not only for engineers. I mean, I studied business administration, and also if you fail 3 times in an exam, that was it. And you have to think about something else to study or whatever you want to do, but you cannot study what you started to study.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it applies to everything. Yeah, I didn't realize that. But yeah, cool.
Yeah. So he founded his own garage. So let's say he was quite a self-made man, started with a normal garage and then later started, and this became the location for Zakspeed Racing, which he founded in 1968 under the name of Zakowski Niederzissen Tuning. And he was practically all his life, and maybe still is, a Ford man, because he started with the Ford Escort and then famously with the Ford Capri, and we will see some of the photos, and continued with Ford, and this was practically also his way into Formula One.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who remember Zakspeed, I mean, unless you are very young, probably the most iconic appearance was not from Formula One, but when they had this Ford Mustang Turbo, which was practically like the very iconic car from the team.
Yes. Exactly. And here you see you see 2 photos of this iconic Ford Capri Turbo. from the 1981 season based on the FIA Group 5 regulations, which they practically in that year dominated.
Yeah, that's right. And this is also, one of those. So if you think about kind of another example of a successful team led by a mechanic, of course, we need to talk about Williams' team, right? So it's very similar in terms of the background of the team principals. So Frank Williams obviously also had the mechanical background. And the cool thing about teams like that, I mean, well, every team is unique, but the commonality between them is that, you're very inventive because you don't have that much funding as maybe some of the more sort of corporate teams, and you constantly have to figure out how you are going to excel with innovation rather than with resources.
Exactly, and also, of course, you have to have people skills, including Erich Zakowski had the opportunity since quite in early times being the official racing team for the Ford team. Here you also have to know that in Germany, the Ford headquarters are in Cologne, so he lived quite near to the German Ford factory. After they dominated the more sports and touring cars, Ford, and especially Ford Germany, wanted to enter the Group C series, which have been very popular, especially in Germany with the Porsche and dominating practically all endurance cars races, including Le Mans. So it was very popular in Germany, and that's of course an interesting series for a German company as Ford Germany. So they developed the Ford C100 in 1982, Ford together with the nearby Ford factory. This car was then driven by Klaus Ludwig, Manfred Winkelhock, and Mark Surer. Manfred Winkelhock had been also in Formula One. Mark Surer, I think, also some few races. And Klaus Ludwig, very famous in Germany, especially in touring cars.
Yeah, and because probably also need to mention that because they effectively started with more kind of a road car than the Formula car,
Yes.
The team was also very successful on a more straighter tracks
Yes.
than on curved tracks, this is also very interesting because. This kind of talks about how do you optimize the car, and what experience you need for that. And of course, you as a team that is organized by kind of more on a passion for cars and more on a kind of mechanical skill, it's also interesting how you kind of set your priorities and what you excel at the in the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
and in this
So,
case, it was more straighter tracks. Yeah.
yeah, so you may also conclude it was more the engine than the aerodynamics.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think this is also very important on the history because the reason why they entered Formula One was practically they had been developing the car, including the engine. The Ford C100, to be honest, hadn't been a big success. So I think one of the best results had been by Jonathan Palmer and Desiree Wilson, a fourth place at the 1,000 kilometers of Brands Hatch. And then also quite fast, Ford lost the interest. So, and Zakspeed continued a little bit using this car in local races. And so they had the car, they had the engine, and they've been thinking what we do with a race engine. and they got the idea, and why not let's build a Formula car around the engine we already have.
Yeah, and
Interesting, yeah,
yeah. Just sorry to interrupt you, Patrick, but
no
yeah,
problem.
I didn't want to like say that. Like engine was probably like engine. It was engine over the aerodynamics because, of course, you are thinking about aerodynamics all the time.
Yeah.
But I absolutely agree with you that as a mechanic, probably the engine is more interesting to you, right? So, and if you have
Yeah.
more like very similar people who are more into engineering and mechanics, then they would be more concentrating on the engine. But then it's very similar, right, with Ferrari because Enzo Ferrari was also all about engine initially
Yeah.
before it kind of began. Like I think aerodynamics just hit Ferrari when they started sort of understanding that you actually this is actually the part that you really need to pay attention to,
Exactly,
considering the
and
competition.
exactly, and it was also a little bit. This strategy was also a little bit similar to the Alfa Romeo in the 1970s, as they had the very successful Alfa 33, the 33, had the engine and had been thinking what we do after sports car racing. As we get bored here, we have the engine. Let's build a Formula One car around it. First they sold. They met the partnered with Brabham, and then they had a complete own car. So it was a little bit the same way. We already have a good engine. Why not entering Formula One? Also interesting is the geography. Zakspeed is located in a small town in the mountains of the Eifel, 77 kilometers from Köln or Cologne. You can see it on the map. Very near the Nürburgring, only 30 kilometers. Also relatively near still to Spa-Francorchamps, 170 kilometers. And with this location, they've been a little bit comparable to another small, sympathetic team, the Eifelland team, which had been participating in Formula One in 1972. The caravan manufacturer, which wanted to have a Formula One team, we did a whole episode about this little team who only raced 1 year.
I wanted to ask you, Patrick, is the workshop still around? I mean, is it is it still? I mean, because I lived myself in Bonn, I didn't know of its existence, to be honest, which kind of speaks a lot about my knowledge of German car making. But yeah, do you know if is it still around? Like, can you go there? And
yes, Zakspeed still exists, and they are still active in tuning, and they are still also active in racing. So yes, they are still in Niederzissen, and you have a good point here. Speaking about manufacturers, and one of the reasons why they have been so beloved, especially in Europe, in Germany, had been because for many, many years there was no big successful Formula One team since Mercedes had this awful accident, and Le Mans we never had, even if you may say we have Germany's leading in car manufacturing in Europe with Mercedes, with BMW, with Audi, Porsche, including Ford. There hadn't been for a long, long, long time no big Formula One teams coming from Germany. So people really appreciated Zakspeed here.
Yeah, brilliant. So I guess if you are around, it probably makes sense to at least drive by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can see the link, and we will publish also here in the information, so you can see where they are. Easy to find with Google Maps. Okay, let's speak about the years in Formula One. The
Yeah, but
first car.
yeah, before that, I guess, yeah, I just want to sort of probably repeat again the genius thought that Patrick normally says is that the smaller teams are always a great opportunity for talented drivers who probably wouldn't have a chance otherwise to be in a Formula One car, which is, very important. And it's a little bit sad to see that now we have kind of more corporate, the cost of entry into the sport is such that we now see a lot of corporate sort of teams, bigger teams with large budgets in Formula One, and not so much the smaller teams, because that's always fun to have those around and see
Yeah,
some talented drivers get a chance to drive.
exactly. And of course, the smaller teams, they are still much nearer to the fans than the big players. Okay, on the right, you see the Zakspeed 841 from 85. As you may think about the name, this car should started originally in the 84 season, but due to the limited budget, this not really worked out as planned. So it started 1 year later. This also had been the typical Zakspeed design, the white and the red, always looking a little bit similar to the McLarens. And this has an easy explanation. Similar to McLaren, at that time, their main sponsor had been the tobacco company West, a German cigarette, which I'm not smoking, and but I always understood as a little bit a local Me Too product. Me Too in the 80s meant a copy of the approach of the market leader. So it looked a little bit like the West cigarettes looked always a little bit similar to Marlboro at that time, and so also the cars always had a very similar design in white and red. And this was the first all-German car since 1962, the Porsche 804. So
Yeah.
similar at that time. And I think in 85, it was only Ferrari who did the whole car, meaning engine and the chassis. And this due to the fact that Zakspeed came from Group C Racing and already had the engine. So even, and here we are speaking about the turbo times. So they're not, so that, let's say, their engine had been an origin in Ford, but it was not the Ford Cosworth, and it was not the later Ford factory engine, which have been used by Benetton, but
Yeah,
their own
that's right.
design.
Yeah, that's right. And so like Patrick already mentioned that it was always kind of limited on resources. So yeah, either it was running with just one car, or they would have, for example, two drivers and no test drivers. So that, it's I think it's always fun to be in a smaller team, but yeah, the financial pressures are quite significant. And given all the limitations, it's amazing that they've been in the sport for quite a long time, because we see these teams kind of coming in and out, and it could be just 1 or 2 years. But Zakspeed, like Patrick said, they had a very cool competitive advantage because they had their own engine, so they practically, it's a very tough market to compete in. So you're not just getting off the shelf components, you are actually producing the car on you. So you're basically trying to become a Ferrari in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly, especially if you're a big petrol head, you appreciate this holistic approach they had. Even if it, of course, you may say it was not realistic to really win races or the championship.
Yeah, and the 841, so this design that you see on your screens, if you're watching us on
Yeah.
YouTube, that's actually quite famous design
Yeah.
for Zakspeed, and probably a lot of people remember Zakspeed either with this, like I said, Ford Mustang Turbo, or with 841 in Formula
Yeah.
1.
Yeah. And they had as drivers starting Dr. Jonathan Palmer, doctor because he is a general practitioner. So only in one occasion, I don't remember if we already mentioned it in one of our episode. I think in our last one, he did the first attendance of one of his colleagues as there was an accident. And later by Christian Danner, who had been at that time a Formula 3000 champion and a big local talent, as you see, and later changed to touring cars for the Alfa Romeo, as also mentioned in our last episode. Then next year, 1986, still with Dr. Jonathan Palmer and Dutch driver Hugh Rottengatter, and unfortunately no points. At that time, you have also to consider there only had been points for the first 6 positions, so it was more difficult to get into the points than today in 2023.
Yeah, and also you have to understand that no points means no sponsorship, so like less important sponsorship. So yeah, so it kind of is a very, 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 very tough market, and you basically you kind of scrambling from race to race, trying to see how we're going to run the car on the next race rather than planning the next year or having some long-term plans in general.
Yeah. If you see us on YouTube or Spotify, you see here the 86 car, and here the sponsorship vest is clearly visible. Going back, here you see it was partly blacked, and the way they blacked it also depends because in the middle of 80s, countries have been implementing anti-tobacco laws. So in some countries, it was allowed to show it. I don't know where this was taken, this photo. Other countries, you had to darken it a little bit, like here. But I mean, honestly, you still can see what it says. In other ones, you had to completely black it out. So it was always a little bit different how the sponsorship of the various teams had been that weekend.
87.
87, and here you see another very genius marketing idea from my point of view. I mean, West, they in some of the countries, it was allowed to change it, so they just put East in the same kind of font. So everybody knew that even if it says East, they mean West. Also, this 1987, we are in the time where the Iron Curtain was falling, so a lot of these tobacco companies had been expanding from west to east, and I think the same was also true for West cigarettes. So it was a quite clever marketing clue to just change west to east. But with this back to the car, Zakspeed started with the 8061, and then later this year switched to the new 8071 cars. Drivers had been Martin Brundle, quite a well-known driver at that time, and he switched to Zakspeed because he was quite unhappy in his 86 team, which I don't remember where he was driving that year. So was it, I think, a French one, but I'm not completely sure. And best year for Zakspeed, 2 points, and with this 10th position in the championship, as always, 2 cars, which maybe also had been a must due to regulation that year. but no test driver like normally the bigger teams has. And Martin Brundle achieved the best position for the team ever with a fifth position at the San Marino Grand Prix.
Yeah, and yeah, again, so this is all kind of financial
Yes.
reasons, right? You don't have the test driver, you have
Yes.
a lot fewer opportunities, but like Patrick mentioned, then you get really inventive with your
Yes.
marketing. And
Right.
then you do other things to make money and attract attention. Really cool.
Yep. And again, I mean, the car always looked a little bit like the McLaren, so quite attention for this small team. Yep. Then 88, and here we have Piercarlo Genzano as a driver, which we see in the photo. So this is the driver, but it's not the car. And German driver Bernd Schneider, who later should become very successful in the German touring cars, especially driving for Mercedes-Benz. This is the last year they used the Zakspeed engine, this due to changes in the regulation, where the turbo engines really had been phased out, and we went back to the conventional engines. This year, Bernd Schneider achieved the best result with a 12th position at Hockenheim, and this best qualification was a quite sensational fourth position in Mexico City, and this thanks to Mexico City's very high altitude, which favored the turbo engine. And even if the turbo engines really hadn't had real chances in Mexico City, still they had been quite strong, and at least stronger than in the other races.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, like I said, it's turbo engines really something that they're remembered for.
Yes.
Yeah. Ultimately, in sort of when we talk about Zakspeed legacy, and it's probably not Formula One that they're remembered for, but it's good that they were present in Formula One.
Yes. And then came 89, which was unfortunately quite a disaster for the team. In 82, they signed a contract with a Japanese company, Yamaha, maybe a little bit more famous for motorcycles than for engines. I mean, everybody in Germany, the team, the fans, the press had been quite optimistic because in the 80s, Japanese car manufacturers had been quite leading the markets based on the quality, which have been much higher than an average European or US car. So signing a contract with Yamaha, even though they don't had any experience regarding Formula One, everybody had been quite optimistic and maybe dreaming that it would be similar than the McLaren Honda team. So this was the dream, but unfortunately, the reality was completely different, as the Yamaha engine was, I think, much too heavy, lacking power. So Zakspeed had been quite on the end of the races, and I think even many times not even survived the pre-qualifying and not qualified for the race themselves.
Yeah, and this is also, not just the the reason for this lack of success is not just some technical issues, but just kind of talking to people from Formula One who told me, who told me that it's quite difficult to work with Japanese suppliers in principle because the culture is completely different. And it takes a lot longer to make decisions. So normally decisions are not made on site, but there is always the need to ask the headquarters in Japan, and it takes several days. So whereas other teams can make really quick decisions, there is definitely kind of this cultural barrier why And this is the reason why we don't have so one of the main reasons why we don't have big Japanese companies, successfully racing for many years in Formula One as a brand, right? So we had, for example, Toyota, but yeah, they were not doing great, even though they were running one of the highest budgets in the sport. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Toyota, and I'm sure we will do a special episode about Toyota in Formula One. There also had been other influences. And I agree, as I'm working together with a lot of Japanese colleagues. So they have, traditionally, you have more the long-term approach. Nevertheless, I mean, you can overcome it and we see Honda as the best example. Again, 23, we have a Honda-powered car leading the championship. So yes, maybe it's not on the first view not the best approach for Formula One, but you can use this, work with this, and overcome this. Yeah, but difficult, and maybe, of course, it doesn't help you being the first one getting this new Japanese engine. As you said, Japanese people have to adapt. We saw this later, maybe a little bit with McLaren, who got the Honda engines some years ago, and have been very
they had the
unhappy.
same problem. Yeah, they had the same problem. Yeah, with decision making. Yeah, because I was talking to an executive at the time, and he told me that main problem is that they can't get quick decisions. But I mean, I think this is like the good point, Patrick. Like, it's all about like how you organize the decision making process, right? And clearly this year it works because something is different about the decision making. Whereas probably, even a few years ago, it was still quite kind of the traditional way. So I guess, if you had the pre sort of agreement that you can make decisions on site, and there will be probably the Japanese team on site who will be helping. So I think it's probably working well. But if you, for example, just had the German team on site and then the Japanese supplier sitting somewhere in Japan, and back in the day when we didn't have, I don't know, Zoom and the Teams and other methods to connect, and the mobile, sort of the telephone communication was just like wired phones and all that kind of stuff. That was probably quite slow, the whole decision-making process.
Yeah, and maybe also a point is that the both corporate cultures not had been quite compatible. I mean, here we see the hands-on Zakspeed with a more Japanese cultured company. At least if I consider the general Japanese culture, I don't know how it is working for Yamaha. In this case,
I wanted to ask you, maybe also the pandemic, I mean, in a sense, helped because I guess maybe the Japanese culture always kind of absorbs it, absorbs different, different changes, and maybe they sort of became less, sort of less worried with remote managing things remotely under pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, also Japanese society is changing. We have more remote. I mean, who was it? Microsoft or Price Waterhouse? I mean, some US company had been testing quite successful 4 days a week in Japan. So also Japanese society is changing. The younger generations, they not only want to live for the office, but also seek having an interesting private life. So all societies are changing. And maybe I'm thinking,
but you still have, for example, so I haven't been to Japan, but I'm planning to travel this year.
Yeah.
And I was told by a friend, for example, that you definitely need to have cash with you like all the time, because there's a lot of things are still in cash. Like it's not card, because of the kind of older generation who never switched to cards, even during the pandemic. So there are some like aspects of culture that you need to be careful of, and it is an interesting thing, how you organize it, right? And when maybe the cultures are quite different, because German car makers, they are not like notorious for making quick decisions, being very efficient, being very quick. Everything, like all the processes are very well organized. But in Japan, it's kind of similar. Like the organization is immaculate, but then the decision making is not fast, right? So it's a completely different approach to it. And then when that clashes, I guess it might not result in a very good outcome, especially if it's a fast moving environment like Formula One.
Yeah, that's correct. But also we have, of course, to see that culture depends also on the organization. We had, on the one hand, let's say for Japanese, or quasi the extreme end is Honda, which was based on one person fulfilling his dream. And on the other hand, maybe the more traditional Toyota. I don't know how is Yamaha, but especially I can see that, especially if you have relative small companies, hands-on like Zakspeed, working together with Japanese. I would see here more problems than a more corporate company, for example, like Red Bull working with a Japanese company like Honda. Okay, so again, this dream became honestly a nightmare for both. And I think this experience also led to the fact that this was the last year for Zakspeed in Formula One. Yamaha stayed some years more. Mm, and even had some better results. I mean, never had been close to winning to races, sorry, but at least I think they got some few points. So they learned from their first year in Formula One, but not enough that they sustainably stayed inside the sports. But I mean, also from a marketing point, it makes sense because they have motorcycles, but not really cars to promote. So being in Formula One didn't make sense, I think, from a marketing point of view. Okay, with this later activities directly after Formula One, Zakspeed went into the German Touring Car Championship, which was very famous in the 1990s. Very spectacular cars, and you see the three manufacturers: Opel with the Calibra, the Mercedes C-Class, and then the Alfa 155. So really very spectacular cars. A lot of high tech included, sometimes even more than Formula One, turbo engines. So really great to watch, and quite fun. In 2008, Zakspeed managed two teams of the Super League Formula One cars, and this have been the cars of Borussia Dortmund and Beijing Guan. I don't remember this series that much. I think it's also it was, I think, focused in the UK. It was quite crazy idea if you think about it. The idea, let me think. The idea of the Super League Formula One, that the big European cars, and I think it was in the beginning of the European Championship, or maybe a little bit before, is that each of the very big clubs should have a formula team. You'll see, for example, here on the right, the car by PSV Eindhoven. So here you saw then the different football or soccer clubs racing against each other, and the league slogan was "The beautiful race football at 300 kilometers per hour." So this series existed 4 years. They've been using V12 engines, so quite attractive for fans, but not enough for this series to survive. First year, 2008, the Zakspeed managed Beijing Guan won. Then next year, Liverpool FC, and then 2010, the car by the RC Anderlecht won. And in 2011, I think half of the teams or something hadn't been with the football sponsorship, so it was a car sponsored by Australia who won the championship.
Right, but that's still quite an interesting profile for a team to be managing the Super League
Yes.
formula. It's not something that you normally see on people's CV.
No, not really.
And yeah, I mean it's quite amazing. I just find that the spectrum and the like I said, coming back to the point of about innovation, and when you are small team, you get yourself in a lot of this like really experimental stuff, which is pretty cool.
Exactly, you get the opportunities, and they have the flexibility and of course the will to take these opportunities. Okay, that's nearly all for it today. Just a reminder, more information, of course, on the web page Zakspeed.de. You can see a little bit about the history, especially related touring cars. So here you see the Ford Escort, practically the car which started the racing legacy for Zakspeed. You find the address if you want to pass by, take a photo at the entrance, because I think there is no museum, so nothing big to see, but you can just pass by and take a selfie, at least.
Yeah, that's right. So definitely worth a trip. And
Yep.
well, with that, I guess, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, do visit the website, and don't forget that our main platform is YouTube, but we're also present on Spotify in video form and on all sorts of podcast platforms in the form of podcast. Thanks to Patrick. And yeah, tell us what you think about Zakspeed team, and maybe some interesting facts that we missed today. We always appreciate the subscriptions and comments, and do press the bell to kind of not to miss the next episodes, and we'll be very happy to see you again. Thanks a lot.
Yep. See you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.